The second reading debate for the Biodiversity Conservation Bill. The question is Bill being now read a second time? I call the member for Maitland.
Thank you, Mr Temporary Speaker. When I went out to Broken Hill last week, or a couple of weeks ago, I felt that sense of coming home as I walked on the flat ground of one of New South Wales' more arid landscapes. And it took me back to my many years as a tour operator, bushwalking and following in a car or a tour bus the journeys of early European explorers in this country, often undertaken while reading their accounts. And while traversing the very landscapes that those men saw with such different eyes to mine, I saw the beginning of that conflicted approach of attempting to control the land rather than working with it, that the Leader of the Opposition referred to in his speech on these bills earlier today. Those accounts show men who saw the diverse and rich landscapes of the interior rural lands of our continent as barren wastelands. There was no alignment with their experiences of life in the rural villages of England and Europe, where many of them had come from. They didn't understand our flora and fauna that had adapted so well to the unique climactic conditions of our continent. They didn't understand the weather patterns of our seasons, the wet and the dry. They were not used to a landscape which could change from dry plains to flooded rivers in a matter of days, weeks or months. This is a land where maps change in a moment, where inland seas are created in a series of heavy rains, where drought is often the default season. Australia is a land of contradictions that cannot be tamed, that will not be mastered, a land that invites only those who listen to share her bounty. Eventually, those early explorers were replaced by the timber getters, who did the vast job of clearing land in our communities, to farmers who over successive generations either learnt to work with the land they farmed or succumbed to the challenges it threw them and failed. And this is the story of coastal New South Wales. And as you drive north and into Queensland, it was all about timber and then dairy, and then as you head north into the sugarcane. And further out to the west, we saw the innovation in farming practices over generations as farmers learnt the capacity of their land, their water and the climate. But these agricultural practices have not always been successful, and sometimes the land that was left to our farmers was often irreparably damaged. For example, in the large-scale clearing of the banks of the Hunter River in my electorate, the Europeans shortened the river by some 23 kilometres. It's changed the path of the river and made many areas more susceptible to flood, which has impacted on our farms. Our decisions around the clearing of land have irreversible impacts. Sometimes our early colonists got it right, and I think particularly, for example, of Goyder's Line, which was developed by George Goyder, then Surveyor General of the Colony of South Australia, which runs roughly east-west across the state and which delineates those areas of the state where the annual rainfall is usually too low to support cropping, and with the land there only being suitable for grazing. This line has proved remarkably accurate over time, but there is acknowledgement that over time and with the current warming caused by climate change, drying and the trends of South Australia's climate change will necessitate a downward shift on Goyder's Line towards the south. There is no doubt from these sort of examples that our landscape in this country is a complex, living and changing environment. And just as generations of farmers have worked this land and learnt their lessons, so too do we need future generations to learn those lessons of the past and farm their lands with respect and understanding. And fundamentally in all of this, our biodiversity must be protected to provide environmental and economic benefits to all in our state. This is an issue that we in this country have been struggling with for generations, and we have had moments where we have made great strides forward in understanding and rising to meet the challenges of this place, with respect for our landscape and our biodiversity, where we've brought together all the elements that provide our farmers with an economic life while protecting their land and our land into the future. And one of those moments was when the New South Wales Carr Labor government in 2003 passed the Native Vegetation Act. The Carr government acted to address the wholesale overclearing of native bushland in the past. Our legislative initiatives have benefited the whole community, the whole state, by protecting natural resources, supporting sustainable agriculture, and therefore making sure that our farmers have a long-term future on this land. Good environmental legislation protects farm businesses, protects rural jobs, ensures that those living and working with our irreplaceable natural resources have productive land to pass down to the next generation. And as the World Wildlife Fund acknowledged, these laws were put in place in 2003 because overclearing of the native vegetation in the past had been a prime cause of soil erosion, degradation of rivers, release of greenhouse gases, and the loss of the state's biodiversity. And even today, Australia's biodiversity is under threat. More than 1,700 species and ecological communities are known to be threatened and at risk of extinction. As degradation of our environment continues to escalate, many ecosystems are increasingly vulnerable to collapse. Balanced biodiversity is crucial. When we have a large number of diverse plant species in our agricultural industry, it thrives. When we have a great diversity of food crops and other biological resources such as medicinal plants used for pharmaceutical drugs, our agricultural industry thrives. Likewise, greater species diversity ensures sustainability for all life forms. A diverse and healthy ecosystem can better withstand and recover from human and natural disasters. We've watched today the members of the National Party swagger into this place and talk about karma, about payback, about getting back in control of their land. They talk about ownership of a land as a legal right, not a relationship which will continue over the coming generations and determine the productivity and the survival of the arable land that they hold in custody. They understand the delicate balance of our rural environments as poorly as they understand the concerns of the people in our rural communities. They do not own the land and they do not own our rural communities. They have no respect for science. They have no respect for the fundamental basis of our land management programs and legislation, some of which have been in place for more than 40 years. The member for Barwon, who's not, from what I heard when I visited his electorate recently, as in touch with his community as he claims, came into this place and told us that farmers know best, that farmers are conservationists, that farmers have correctly managed this land and need no governance of their farming practices. We know that this has not always been the case, that while there are farmers who have very strong conservation values and practices, it has not always been so. We have seen farmers and regions fighting over water rights. We have seen innovation in some sectors and in some farming practices disadvantage other farmers and other regions. The member for Barwon is right on one thing, and that is that the vast majority of farmers do farm responsibly. And that is shown in their objection, the objection of many hundreds of farmers to this legislation. And it's precisely because we have the kind of laws in this state that we do that protect our land, not just for these farmers themselves, but for their neighbours, for their children, for those who will farm in the future on those lands, for those who are downriver, for those who are in other states. And in an increasingly global environment of land ownership, where even in little boutique farming communities like mine, we have absentee landlords from other countries buying up our farming land, we need to ensure that there is a clear set of rules which protects our lands. We need to ensure that these new custodians of our land do not have to start from scratch to learn about how to work with this land, that they do not replicate the mistakes of our colonial farmers from 2 centuries ago. I have many people in my community that complain about the lack of weed management on some of these properties, the lack of appropriate farming practices. There are ongoing complaints and disputes in my areas about the management of the levee bank, for example, in Maitland, where new farmers who do have no understanding of the way the Hunter River works will get into the ear of the under-resourced local land services and make significant changes which are having very negative impacts on farmers who have worked with the river and their farmlands for generations. Mr Speaker, I ask for an extension of time.
Questions to the member for Maitland seeking an extension. Extension is granted.
There are land conflicts between agriculture and mining, agricultural and development all over the Hunter, and this bill undermines the ability of farmers to argue for the retention of prime agricultural land in the face of these conflicts, when the very management of that land from an agricultural perspective has been walked back in regressive and environmentally destructive legislation. Farming these days is a business, And the complexity of this legislation adds more complexity to these businesses, more red tape and regulation for those businesses. In something as vital as the protection of the production values of our land, we need to ensure that the rules are clear, that they're understood by everyone, and this legislation cannot achieve this. Over many years and in consultation with stakeholders from all sides, the Labor Party has cherished our unique natural assets and put in place valuable checks and balances which have sought to protect the environment and, just as importantly, protect those living and working on the land and provide them with a clear pathway to successful farming. The Carr Labor government left a legacy which showed our understanding that land is eternal, that it endures. It is not just about an owner. It is not just about my land or your land. It is the land that belongs to all of us, and that our relationship with this land will continue through generations, and we must protect that for all the future custodians of our country. These bills repeal a number of acts, and I will not go through all of the different criticisms that Labor has of this particular series of bills, because in the end of the day, I know it's been a long debate, and my colleagues from Labor have made such good contributions to highlight the deficiencies of these bills. But, Mr Speaker, what I do want to end by saying is that these laws will increase broad-scale land clearing. They'll lead to further extinctions of native animals. They'll drive up greenhouse gas emissions, and they are a complete capitulation of environmental protection to the most extreme elements of the National Party. This is bowing to those who only see things from their own perspective and have no care or regard for the long-term sustainable production of our lands. We must act to protect our biodiversity and our environment for everyone in this state, not just now, not just tomorrow, but for the future generations. Mr Speaker, I urge the members of the government, if they really care about their rural communities, if they really care about the productive capacity of this country to feed this state, our country and the rest of the world, they should not support this regressive and shameful piece of legislation. Thank you.
I thank the member for Maitland.